Okay, we got a big showing here, so that's good. Hello, my name is Jeffrey Banks. I am the INCOSE Washington Metropolitan Area Tutorials Chair. And this is our second what we refer to as MBSE Tools Demo Days. So this is our second one. This year for the month of February. We have model-driven solutions, um, who's going to present their tool, their SysML tool, and Ed Seidowitz. Ed, did I get your last name? Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. Ed Seidowitz is going to be presenting on their product, the SysML V2 product. Um, so with that, I would like to turn it over to Ed to kick off his presentation and demo. So over to you,
Okay,
Ed.
great. Thank you. Okay, specifically, what I'm going to be talking about today is a site we're putting together called systemsmodeling.com, and that is SysML v2 based. So, just give you a little background before I go into the demo. Um, I think everybody probably is familiar with SysML v2 and familiar with the concepts of model-based systems engineering, the idea of putting the systems model at the center. But what we have today is still a lot of spreadsheets. Uh, and we do have modeling tools, but we got a lot of different modeling tools. And what we're trying to move towards in the future is a systems modeling environment that's a lot more integrated, where we have the ability to do modeling and rich modeling language, do simulation and analysis, and we could connect to various repositories. This is what we're trying to do with SysML v2. SysML v2 is a language, but it is a language that also has a set of standard API and services, has a large set of libraries. So it provides an enabling environment for doing this kind of an integrated MBSE tooling. Now, there's a lot of folks that are working towards this, and mostly they are commercial tools, and you're going to be paying a lot for them. What we decided to try to do with systemsmodeling.com is to see if we could create a actual production quality environment from open source tooling. Now, that's still not 100% there yet, so I'll give you the vision and then I'll say what our first steps are. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate is just our first steps along this. But the vision really is to provide complete support for MBSE, but using But if you want to get premium support, then you do paid subscriptions. You got the subscription model, but still can have complete access to the V2 environment. Um, but beyond that, I think one of the real advantages I'm trying to get to with SysML v2 is having the ability to not have to start every modeling effort from scratch, of having systems engineering models that help you get started. So the one hand, the idea is to build kind of a GitHub for systems modeling, but beyond that, also have some curation and be able to actually have these different subdisciplines, the ability to have curated libraries to actually help you get started rather than just have to search things down. And then support for private deployment. So this, right now, we're running out in the cloud. Um, but the whole thing is packaged up. So the idea is that for clients for security reasons, or privacy reasons, or just because they need it for performance, can run this in the private cloud, run it internally with a private deployment. So that's the vision. Oh, and also beyond model-driven solutions, we're working with partners, so we'll have associated development, training, and consulting services. The current status is not quite as far along as I'd hoped to be at this point for various reasons, but we do have a publicly available preview environment, and we've have had it available now for, I think, about a year. Um, which has the Jupyter Hub deployment of SysML v2. So we are providing through systemsmodeling.com now the uh, primary initial deployment, public deployment of the SysML v2 pilot, eventually reference implementation. So we always keep up to date on that and provide the capability of everybody to be able to get in there and use the latest release of the pilot implementation. We are running on the OpenMBE Flexo SysML v2 repository, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is in a moment. And we do have some prototype document generation. That was what I had hoped we'd be further along to demo today, but I can show you where we are. That gives you some idea of some additional capabilities that could be built in this environment. Some capabilities that we've had in other environments. The old OpenMBE had them, and now we're sort of rebuilding them around SysML v2. So many of you, I would also assume, are familiar with the SysML v2 pilot implementation. We just recently got the 2026-01 release out. That's available in GitHub and systems modeling site. And it is the implementation that we are using in systemsmodeling.com because it is the most complete open source implementation. It's really the only complete open source implementation at this time. We are continuing to work on it. So as a pilot implementation, it is supporting the revision task forces for SysML kernel and SysML 2. Kernel 1.1, SysML 2.1, and it is also being worked on to be the reference implementation and support conformance testing. But we are also committed, this is particularly for model-driven solutions, in continuing to work on it from a performance point of view and a usability point of view to make sure that it is developed into a production quality implementation. I think that's important. That's one of our goals for the reference implementation is not just to have it be the gold standard of conformance, but it to be a actual usable implementation for actual production work. So I mentioned OpenMBE. That's the model-based engineering environment that was used as a version for SysML v1. It's an open source collaborative engineering system that was originally developed by JPL. It's now an open community for developing and using the system. It's sponsored out of NumFocus, which sponsors also the Python and Julia and a number of other open source projects are sponsored out of NumFocus. Motto is connected engineering for a connected world. So this is sort of the open source model-based environment, and we are building on top of that the SysML v2 support along with the OpenMBE community. The current OpenMBE community is OpenMBE architecture was called the Flexo architecture, the F. If you're a fan of Futurama, it's one of the robots from Futurama, Flexo. So the Flexo architecture has a repository that is RDF based. So it merges together the modeling world and the semantic web world. That provides this sort of central capability for not only being able to persist a model using the systems modeling API. You could take your favorite SysML v2 ID. It doesn't have to be Jupyter. It could be whatever model authoring environment supports the standard API that can be written into the repository. But you can also then connect that repository to the semantic web world with linked data tooling. Also integrate it with other tooling. That's going to be extremely important going forward. SysML v2 provides the capability for not just doing systems modeling, but an integration hub bringing together the various engineering disciplines that have to be connected through systems engineering. Finally, I'll show a little bit about document integration, both presentation and authoring of documents, so the model becomes primary, and then you can generate documents as artifacts. OpenMB, the earlier architecture for this, worked with SysML v1. Now we're building on top of it with SysML v2. Just for those of you who might be interested in the connection to the semantic web, the underlying SysML v2 ontology and the RDF format. It's interesting because we've got on the one side here the systems modeling API. The systems modeling API primary implementation of that is a REST API, and it uses JSON. That needs to be translated into RDF to go into the Flexo repository, and have the same transformation going back again. There is a normative JSON schema for the SysML payload for encoding a SysML model into JSON. There is now also, this is not normative yet, but there is a SysML ontology, and the RDF is actually based on that OWL ontology for representing the model in RDF format. And these are both derived from the common source, which is why they're connected, which is why it's, if not straightforward, not it's quite possible to transform back and forth between them. They both come from the normative SysML MOF model as exported to this .uml file. That's also, I haven't heard much about this lately, but there was a lot of interest from Oasis for having a good OSLC representation. That's the open system, lifecycle connectivity for tool connectivity. That's part of the API standard. It's actually an OSLC technology binding, OSLC PSM. A lot of work went on in finalization to make that a much better OSLC representation. And again, that was actually that used their own version of RDF, but it's consistent with the RDF approach we're using in OpenMBE. Finally, I'm actually going to demonstrate a little bit about the document generation. So I wanted to talk a little about views and what in SysML v1 is called views and viewpoints. Well, viewpoints had sort of in SysML v1 had multiple purposes. They talked about the relationship of the views you define to stakeholders, but they also provided the rendering capability for what's called the viewpoint method, but really was how you rendered the view. That's been separated out. So in SysML v2, viewpoint is totally has to do with requirements for the view in order to satisfy stakeholder concerns. I won't be talking about that. But we have the idea, as in everything else, we have the idea of definition and usage of views in SysML v2, the definition and usage pattern that you find throughout SysML v2. So the idea of defining what the view is now in the view definition. And all the standard views have these view definitions in the standard, where the definition itself gives criteria for filtering the models, like the action flow view has elements related to actions, and the geometry view has elements related to geometry, and the rendering of them in the standard is given by the graphical notation. There are these three that are actually in the standard, but do not yet have graphical notation. That's actually being worked on. These all have standard graphical notation, but the way that's represented in your model is if I want to do a view of the model, I actually create a SysML v2 view, one of these standard views, and that's actually what is then rendered to create a diagram or some other view for your model. What we have prototyped at this point is this idea of having quite a simple document view library, but it's amazing how far you can go with a simple library. The idea is I want to create a document. Document is going to be a kind of view. It is a representation of my model, some portion of my model. That document is going to be divided up into sections. That section is a kind of segment. Now, we tried to figure out what to call these things. We didn't want to call them parts because that's a little confusing from a V2 point of view. So we use this generic term segment. So a segment is a specific kind of rendering within the document. So a document has a section, and the section then has a set of segments, and the segments, you can have sections and subsections, and then the various leaf segments, you can have a set of text, you can have a diagram. So this actually is a tree rendering, renders a tree diagram, a list. This one we haven't done yet. There's actually work going on some standard table stuff. We were going to try to work on doing tables, but we put that off. There's actually a lot of work going on right now on a nice proposal for standardizing it into tables. This is another one we haven't done yet, but now there's work going on right now on better representing the rendering of diagrams in a standard way for diagram interchange. Ultimately, what you want to be able to do is have diagrams within your user model, and then you create a document, point to those diagrams. Ideally, there would be enough rendering information in the model that I can actually re-render to the diagram and get something that looks like what I had in my original tool without having to exchange like an SVG. Actually still have that as a a diagram that's interchangeable in SysML v2. We're not there yet, but this would support referencing and re-rendering a diagram from a user model. What we have done is a prototype with basically these four kinds of segments. So the idea is you have a model. Vehicle model is our standard example. So this is used textual notation for a SysML v2 model. And then you've got another model here of the document, and that is a view model. It has in it views, view usages of those various definitions, document, the section, etc., with subviews. That all can go in the repository. This is all SysML v2. The key new thing here is that the model of the document itself is in SysML v2. And all the information you need for rendering that document will ultimately be in SysML v2. And therefore, can all be stored in this common repository, and we can render out of the repository. So that's the background. I assume people want me to go on to the demonstration. I'll stop briefly and see if there are any questions. I'm not quite sure how you guys would handle questions.
Yeah, you can pause here for any questions on your presentation or wait to the end. It's up to you.
If people have a couple questions, I can go ahead now. But we can leave plenty of time at the end for questions and discussions. Okay, let me go ahead and go through the actual demonstration portion here. Like I said, this is an early preview that sort of lays out the idea of where we want to go with this whole effort. But you can go to this site, to systemsmodeling.com, create an account, and if nothing else, you'll always have access that way to the latest release of the pilot implementation. Going to go ahead and log in here. So it's a typical login, and right, you can sign up online. And then you get the dashboard. Now, right now, we only got two buttons on the dashboard. We have going to Jupyter Hub and just the standard documentation. We're looking to expand that out. Eventually, you'll have a repository view, connection into other training material. We're working with training partners to actually connect in training material into the repository. So we've got some good things coming. Just going to take a little time to get it all connected up. But we do have Jupyter Hub running, so it's automatically hands off over to Jupyter Hub. And if you've used Jupyter Hub It's an implementation of the Jupyter Notebook or an environment for running Jupyter Notebooks in Jupyter Lab. The Jupyter Notebooks themselves are fairly well-known technology at this time for handling, came out of Python for doing interactive Python. So to combine the ability to scientific and engineering notebooks with rich text and combine them with actual, usually executable programs. This is actually having a SysML deployment for it has been one of the most useful ways for us early on to have gotten SysML v2 out for people to use. So what I'm going to do is go to this environment. So in this environment, you get your own little virtual server. And right here, I'm going to start up, and this is my simple vehicle model, some bigger. So here we've got a fairly typical example of a SysML v2 model in textual notation, a small example. We've got a set of definitions, part definitions, define what a vehicle is, an engine, transmission, port definitions for connections between them, item definitions, things that flow cross connections between ports, action definitions, actually carrying out the behavior of the vehicle, and then various convenience for various attribute definitions, mostly um, around some quantities. The configurations here are where we use the usage focused approach and create actual part usages. So we've got a vehicle here, which is the part usage for the vehicle, and I've got another configuration. Actually, I don't have it. I cut this down to just one configuration. That's why it says configuration one, because I had configuration two, but that's not important for this demo. But I've got a parts tree here that shows a specific vehicle, specific engine, connects the engine to the transmission. Doesn't go any further than that, just engine and transmission. And then this is an action tree, which shows providing power and a set of actions connected together. This is a little more interesting. This is a fuel economy analysis model. And you'll notice here some documentation that'll be interesting, and that we'll be getting that into our document. This is using Markdown, so it's rich text, but using a simple Markdown notation to have documentation for this analysis. This analysis has a number of steps. I've taken out the actual computations, but we do have a version that actually has the computations. These are calculation definitions, basically mathematical functions. And then this is the actual analysis for the fuel economy analysis. What we have here is both the model of the vehicle itself and this analysis. In this environment, I can process that. So that just processed it, but then I do have a capability here of doing simple visualization. For those of you who have used the pilot implementation, you know we have visualization that's based on Plant UML. A lot of effort has gone into stretching this as far as possible, and it actually is looking pretty close to the standard, but it's not good enough. The Plant UML, the base for that, that's open source rendering, just can't really handle what we want to do with SysML v2. So if I try to do this, as an interconnection view, you can see that doesn't look very good. It just isn't able to render it very well. That's an underlying problem with the open source. There is another effort going on for open source SysML v2, the Syson project. It's an Eclipse project, primarily being worked on by the French company OBO and some of their partners. And they have been focusing on the graphical side of things. We are discussing joining forces, and if nothing else, we'll be incorporating the graphics from Syson. Our plan is to incorporate those into systemsmodeling.com to have high quality graphics as Syson proceeds. So right now we still have this view capability, but we know this needs to be improved. But you can still do quite a bit here with these commands. Um, let's go back to right. So I can compress it. This shows it using all compartments. So this is the compartment notation in SysML v2. So this is running in Jupyter Notebook, or actually Jupyter Lab. It's based on these notebooks, which are maintained here, which have the textual notation. They're actually, each one of these notebooks represents a SysML v2 project, and each one of, in effect, each cell here is a SysML v2 model within that project, and I can have multiple ones. I can have a notebook that has multiple SysML v2 v2 models that reference each other and whatnot. But I really want connections across different projects. I could do that through the repository. At this point, I cannot have notebooks import each other, but I can publish my project to the repository. So we have both this capability of dealing with the text notation, but also this connection to the underlying Flexo repository. So you can see there's a number of projects that are in the repository. Now, right now, there's only one repository that everybody hits, and it is not controlled. We've been waiting for the implementation from the Flexo team. We had been waiting. I think they're done now on getting more single sign-on integration, so we can integrate that in. So that'll be the next step that we do is actually expand our single sign-on. So when you sign on to Jupyter Hub, not only will you have your own virtual server with your Jupyter notebooks, but you'll also have your own area within the repository that you'll have authentication and authorization for automatically. So there'll be a common area where people can share models through the repository, and also you'll have your own controlled area. Of course, for any production use, it's going to be critical that you be able to have your own control over your repositories. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and publish that simple model out. It actually was already out there. So what this actually does is update it, but there wasn't anything changed. So it's actually just replacing it with itself. I'm going to go over here. This is that document library that I showed you. This is the actual document library. Just to show you that actually is now published also into the repository. So the document library is there in the repository. So now what I want to do is bring those two things together. Again, if this was set up with the multi-user repository, the document library would be in the common part of the repository, and you'd be working in your own part, and then you could just bring in the document library from the common assets. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load this. So I can now load this in. So, if I this first time for technical reasons, it needs to go through and set stuff up with the library. So this will take a moment. So this reaches back in to the notebook. Right now, we do not have the capability to serialize back to text. But there is the capability to visualize out from that. Um, there's actually some model to text. Ultimately, we'd like to have in there and be able to get the text back from the abstract syntax. But there's a pilot implementation of that for a while we've had that hasn't been made public because it's not ready yet. So here, right, that simple model, I have not loaded it yet. So you can see it's not in my notebook here. If I go ahead and load the model now, it's loaded in. So that was the whole. Um, you can see it a little more if I say part definitions. Oops. All right. Well, I thought that was the top. Oh, definitions, part definitions. There, you see part definitions. Now I'm going to create a model of the actual vehicle documentation. This is again a 100% standard SysML v2 model. Import the document library and the simple vehicle, and this brings them together. I'm going to have a vehicle document. That's my simple vehicle called simple vehicle model. It has an overview section called overview, and this is the text that's going to be in that section. It is going to be automatically rendered using Markdown, so the dashes will become bullets. Then I'm going to have a section that is the set of definitions, and this is again standard SysML v2. I have a definition list. This is one of those list segments that is going to expose the definitions. So this says take all the definitions, everything in that definitions package, filter and just show me packages. As the model turned out, it's only packages. But in general, what you do with a view is you take that view definition, you say what elements are going to be exposed using that definition, and then I can filter to subset the elements that are exposed, and only the ones that pass the filter actually get rendered in the view. So here under configurations, a little more interesting, I have the parts tree. So for the parts tree, I'm going to expose vehicle one as an interconnection diagram. I'm going to have an action tree here. I took this out. I'm going to be a little, put this back in. I think this should work now. Let's see how the states, we have some issues with actually the states, the re-rendering of the states. Yeah, let's see how that works out. I'm going to be, take a risk, see how that comes out now. Then for the fuel economy analysis section here, that's a little more interesting. I'm going to get back to that in a second. Let me just process this. Yep. Oh, that's because I took it. That's why it was. All right, that's never mind. I'll put that back in. Never deviate from your demo script. All right. So now I have this document command. This is not a part of the standard Jupyter deployment. This is only available on systemsmodeling.com at this time. It's a very simple prototype that walks the structure of your document model and does the rendering called for by each of the segment definitions to actually render each of the view usages for those segments. And then generates the document in HTML. So here we have simple vehicle model. We've got the overview. The definitions have come out. The parts tree, this shows as a interconnection. Like I said, the rendering is not real great in Plant UML, but you've got the action tree. So that's the action being rendered there. Now for the fuel economy analysis. So this goes a little bit further. You notice here that I have actually, this is again a fully standard SysML v2 expression. What this says is take the fuel economy analysis model, but go to the meta level. Rather than treating that as an analysis I'm going to execute, treat it as a SysML element. Get its documentation and get the body of that documentation. So I am now actually querying the model. I'm using SysML v2 to query a SysML v2 model. That will actually get the documentation. So I'm taking this element, I'm getting the documentation, and then I'm getting the body of the documentation, which is this text, which will have these asterisks automatically stripped off. That's actually part of the standard. Then what our document generation does is renders that right here using Markdown, renders it as rich text. Here I've got a list of the calculation definitions. So I take the fuel analysis model, and this shows one of those filters. And here I've done a diagram and I'm just showing the fuel economy analysis diagram. But the interesting thing is that I can actually query the model itself using SysML v2. I don't need another query language. I don't need another meta language. Now, I could put a nicer UI on top of this, a wizard that helps you do it yourself, a LLM, whatever. But in the end, you don't need another engine. You can use SysML v2 to do all the expressions. Now, yes, the actual document generation is right now non-standard. There's actually some interest in potentially standardizing how to do this document modeling, so you can then get multiple tools do it. That's actually pretty straightforward once you decide how you're going to model it, and have this capability in effect, what's sometimes called a transclusion capability. You get out of the box with SysML v2. And then, of course, we can go beyond that, and this will generate it as an HTML file. At one point, we had also integration demonstrated. So here I can bring up an actual generated as a document file. Have Confluence integration is pretty straightforward since this is HTML. It's on an HTML page. Not going to do that now, so they don't have the link. But that shows the idea of where we want to be going with this. Okay, let me switch back over here. That'll went pretty quickly. So our next steps. As I said, we really want to have controlled repository access. That really has prevented us from rolling this out as anything but a preview, as a prototype, because we need to be able to give people authentication. And so ultimately, one of the next major steps is to have the ability to create your own repositories, to have, like you can have with GitHub, and have your own controlled repositories, decide whether they're public or private, be able to share with other people or not, and have that all managed under your account. I was hoping to have that step towards that by the end of last year, but for both technical and business and political reasons, it didn't happen. So we're now trying to set up the project to actually work on that this year. Integration with Syson for graphical rendering. There's no point in having two open source solutions. So working together to provide the best open source platform for SysML v2 across textual and graphical notation. Integration with online training. Training is going to be very important going forward, move from V1 to V2. And what we're trying to do is work with training providers so we can have good training. You can have on-demand training, video training, but then you can have those examples available, and you can go to your systemsmodeling.com account and actually do exercises and play with the examples in a real SysML v2 environment. And what we have actually committed to OMG, and again, we're trying to work with some folks to have our target for real document generation is to work on generating specification documents for OMG specification work. For the actual SysML v2 specification documents as they exist now, they were actually, and they are still maintained in the previous generation of Open MBSE, which means we're really using UML and SysML v1 to maintain now what are SysML v2 artifacts. We really want to move beyond that. We want to have a SysML v2 environment for Open MBSE to maintain the SysML v2 specification documents, and move entirely to a SysML v2 meta environment eventually, and tie that in and support the creation of other specifications at OMG using this modeling technology. So that's also something we're trying to move to this year to support the revision task forces. So if you're interested, you can contact me, Ed S. modeldriven.com, or you're welcome to uh, send a message to info@modeldriven.com, or I'm welcome to, there's plenty of time left for us to have a further discussion here today.
All right. Well, thanks, Ed, for your presentation and demo of the system modeling.com environment with SysML v2. So I'll go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that you may have for Ed.
Can't find where's Zoom gone? Interesting. I actually find it's because
Any questions for Ed?
no questions.
You got a quiet
This is
audience today.
Ed. Sorry,
Oh,
I had to
okay.
find my mute button. Hi Ed. If we wanted to get an account, and like use the examples that are in Jupyter Hub, do we just email you about it, or do we just go and sign up on the website?
So right now, you just go to the website. You can sign up, get an account. However, right now, when you get an account, you'll basically have an empty Jupyter Hub.
Mhm.
I can provide, like, we don't have a good mechanism right now for sharing across. Uh, if you're interested in some of the examples that I showed, I can provide those examples as .sysml files, and you can import and play with them. Um, so if there's when I provide, I assume you're going to want my presentation, copy of my presentation. Um,
Yes.
I could provide the .sysml files along with that. So provide the examples, um,
Okay.
and then
Thank you.
you can import that.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I also see it like there are more examples on your GitHub as well.
Yeah. So and all of those. So let me go over to here. It's actually pretty straightforward. So if you go to here, if you want to get them into your environment, so you can play with them in your environment, you
Mhm.
just do this upload files. So if you go to the upload files, um, I can go, for instance, to uh, where I have the pilot implementation, and there's a lot of these.
Okay. So I
So if
would
I go
just
here, yeah, you can just go in here. Like here's another vehicle example. I can go in here, and
Okay, yeah, that works. So I would just download
so
from your
the thing is,
repository and
yeah,
connect.
once you import it in here, it doesn't come in as a notebook. So we don't have an import as a notebook. It's just a
Hmm.
.sysml file. So you don't actually have the kernel. So what you need to do is then you can just cut and paste it also, but you need to actually create
Okay,
this, and then right, you can take this, and we need to work on a better import capability, but that's actually a little. It's a shame you can't quite just open it up because all you want to do is. But if I paste that in there, all right,
okay.
that
Yeah,
works.
that's copy paste. That's straightforward. Thank you.
All
Anyway,
right. We got a question from Kathy.
yeah,
Thank you for the presentation, first of all, and the demonstration. I had a question about configuration management, with a repository. I know you mentioned you're working on, controlled access, but is there a sort of also an audit plan to sort of be able
yep,
to, know what version of the model you're dealing with, for example?
yes. So the Flexo repository implements the full versioning service from the standard API. So it has the capability to actually version at an element level. Um, we're not taking advantage of that right now. Right now, what would what happens is that every time I publish, it does a commit that replaces. So we are doing multiple commits. So it's basically a version repository. I did not mention that, but that's a good point. I should say that once we get past the next step of having your own authentication and authorization on the repository, the next step will be to allow you to actually um, do things. You can already do branches, can't do merges yet. Um, so within the repository, the underlying capability is there. We just have to decide how to surface that relative to the Jupyter Notebook. And there's an interesting question that is actually in discussion in general of how to manage what you put in the repository relative to what you have in your notebooks here. Because you notice there's natural Git integration also. Um, so yes, that will be in there. We're just working out the best way to do it.
I have a subsequent question, and I didn't see any other hands. Obviously, with open source, the idea is to be able to access different models and kind of work in an open environment. What kind of exchange testing have you done with, established commercial products that cost a lot of money? Uh,
Um, Not a whole lot yet because those products are just starting to come out with support. Um, we have found that if you're exchanging in terms of the textual notation, that Dassault has strong support for that. SenseMetry has strong support for that. Um, Not all the other vendors can really handle the import of complete models yet in the textual notation. In terms of the API, we do have it has been demonstrated that you can write from, I believe it was from Cameo, using their standard API to Flexo and to non-Dassault repositories. So there has been some demonstration of being able to use multiple tools to write to an API repository. Um, there aren't, again, a whole lot of uh, systems modeling API implementation yet. Dassault has one. Who else has announced? I mean, we've got the pilot, we've got Flexo. Um, I blank. There's one other. Um, so yeah, the API itself is actually interesting. It has demonstrated the ability to do integration, and that was actually shown recently at INCOSE IW, where also you're able to uh, even if you're using, say, the Dassault repository, uh, you can use the standard API to get information out of it. And as a matter of fact, it would be possible with systemsmodeling.com. You don't actually have to use the built-in Flexo repository. You can actually use this environment. You can point it to any repository where you have an endpoint that you have access to and that meets the systems modeling uh, API standard. So I guess the short answer is yes, we're working on that. We've demonstrated the ability to do interchange. It's relatively limited, and that's mostly because the commercial tools are pretty new for it. But I will say that we're already further along the path of being able to do standardized model interchange than we ever were with UML or V1, which is heartening. That as the tools come out, they're actually supporting the standards. Is that the question you were asking?
Yeah, I don't know. Kathy,
You did
did
again.
Yeah, that answers my question.
okay.
I have another one, but I'm going to let Omar go next, and I'll follow up if there's no other hands.
Okay.
All right, Omar, over to you. Omar.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Kathy. Thank you, Ed, for this presentation. I am curious if you have had a chance in your environment to do any experimentation with transforming from SysML version 1 to 2, and if you can share any of that, if you have done any experimentation.
Quite a bit, but that's a separate project. So I have been model-driven solutions and worked with Siemens to produce maybe the only right now complete V1 to V2 translator. It's available though not through systemsmodeling.com. It's available as a Siemens early access product. So if you're interested, I can connect you up. The folks working on it was myself and Tim Vilkins from OOSE, and we're the ones who are in charge of the standard. So we got the opportunity to actually create a product that takes most of SysML v1 and UML and can translate it into v2 textual notation. Right. If that would be a separate thing that I'd be able to demonstrate at some point, but it is a Siemens product, not an MDS product that MDS will be providing services support for it. And we have, I did a presentation on that recently at the SysML v2 Readiness Forum. I'd be happy to come back and give the presentation here also on that if you guys are interested sometime in the future.
I'm going to go ahead and ask my third question. So, have you found the SysML version 2 to be fairly robust? Is there sort of any kind of bug tracking forum and like mini updates to SysML version 2?
Oh, a lot. No, it's perfect. Perfect. The rest of the world that needs to change. Um, there's at multiple different levels. All right. So in terms of the standards itself, it is now a released OMG standard. And if you go, you can get the actual standard document. If you go to omg.org/spec/sysml. This is the formal specification documents. And then there is a link on here. They should provide an easier link here. There's a link to go to actually submit issues. Here you go, issues associated with the specification. Reports. So if you go down here, you can see that you get issues reports. So these are issues. These are the open issues that are currently have been. So yes, there are people have reported quite a few issues. Now the group that works on this is called the Revision Task Force. So the which I actually co-chair with Tim Vilkins, and we actually have resolved some of these, but and it gets resolved in multiple steps, and this site doesn't get updated until our report is officially approved. So work is ongoing, but people are reading the specification very carefully, and down to the level of, this is sample text notation error. Somebody pointed out that, oh, there was an error in the textual notation. So some of these are pretty simple typos, but some of them are, we need a view mechanism for tables and matrices. That's actually a major update that's being worked on for 2.1. So that's all together in this list. We've got a separate JIRA that organizes it better, but this is the publicly available list. If you see a problem with the specification and want to report an issue, then this is the report form. It's omg.org/issues, create new issue. If you go to the main OMG page, you can also get to this. Oops, no, that's not the main OMG page. So if you go to specifications, tier report issues. So that's how to find that. That's anything from typos in the specification to errors in how we've done, formal constraints to wishes for a new feature. Anybody can put in any issue on that, and then it's up to the RTF to prioritize and decide what we can get done for 2.1. That is ongoing work. Right now, the target is to have the 2.1 report, I think, by December of this year. It could get delayed, or we could decide to say there are some critical issues you want to get done earlier, and we're going to have a discussion, the OMG meeting in March. So that's the actual specification. Then the pilot implementation. There are implementation bugs in the pilot implementation that get fixed. So if you're using the pilot implementation, or if you're using systemsmodeling.com and there's an implementation bug, then where we don't have a formal reporting mechanism for that. You can go to GitHub and put it on GitHub, but we don't use GitHub issues. We've got an internal Jira for the development team where we do our bug reports. But we have oftentimes it isn't a bug, it's people still learning the language. So I strongly encourage people to go to the SysML v2 to the Google group. So this is where if you just aren't sure, if anytime you have a question, you do need a Google account, you need to request to join, but everybody can join. We've got a pretty good community now of discussing. So if you have a question, and I or one of the other folks on the team can't get to it, we've got a community now that can often answer the question for you. Have a good discussion. So anybody who gets involved, I encourage them to involve in using SysML v2 to join this Google group. And sometimes people will bring up bugs with the pilot implementation, and then we'll handle them. But if you really think you have an implementation bug, then you can, on the pilot implementation, you can go directly to the GitHub site. Let's find the. So this is our GitHub site, systemsmodeling.com, and either on the release or in the pilot implementation, you can put in an issue. You see, we do have some issues here, but I generally, unless you really think it's a bug in the implementation, I try to discourage people because we're not actually tracking most of our issues through GitHub. It gets too complicated to do that. Anyway, so there's all sorts of stuff going on to try to deal with various levels of issues. But getting back to your point, having answered sort of, you started out by saying it's a language robust. I would say actually yes, for a language that has just been standardized and actually a quite significant specification. There are people out there now. It's not perfect. There are problems with the spec. A lot of the problems are easy to work around because they're typos, or there are a few critical issues that we're dealing with, but all the major vendors are involved with that. So as people actually get to the point where they're implementing it, we get a consistent resolution when we find these issues. And even ahead of 2.1, we'll be putting out beta releases of the pilot implementation as we actually do resolutions. We haven't yet, but we'll be putting out beta releases that will sort of let you know where things are going to with 2.1. So yes, people are actually using the language now for some real modeling work for some real projects. In fact, interestingly enough, they were using it even before it was standardized, some of the early adopters. I think the primary issue for using SysML v2 has not been is the language robust, but has been number one, can we get tools that can support an enterprise environment? And number two is just training people, is making that transition from V1 to V2. I don't think that most people who have started using the language, they're not running up against fundamental problems with the language or even the implementation. What they're running up against is the fact that it's not just an evolution from V1. They basically have to learn it as a new language. Hopefully one that fits better their system engineering concepts, but it is a new language.
Thanks, Ed.
Of course, I'm biased, but
All right. Any other questions for Ed? Comments? I'm hearing none. So,
that's good questions.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for providing questions. And let's give Ed a round of applause, virtual applause for his presentation and demo. Thank you, Ed. Taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're very busy.
Yeah, I'm glad to present, and I'd like to. I'm a member
Especially.
of the chapter, so I should get more involved. Actually,
Mhm.
watch some of the other presentations. I get so I'll
Yeah,
try to be
actually,
around.
that's it. We'd love that.
I'll try to be
Yeah.
around a little bit more.
Yeah,
Get
actually.
more
Oh
involved.
yeah. Yeah, we certainly can use the help on a number of committees and that we have ongoing within the
Just
chapter.
to let you know,
Mhm.
I say that and then don't have time to do anything.
I know. I just put it out there. Um,
but
yeah, so again, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to present. Um, for the audience on the call here, we do have another MBSE tools tutorial scheduled for tomorrow, um, Wednesday, February 18th. We'll have OBO, which Ed pointed out is a company that he's partnering with. They're going to let's see. Yeah, they're going to talk about their tool, Capella, which is another MBSE tool.
yep,
It's not quite SysML,
it's not the
but
SysML
it
v2
is
tool, but
right. That's right.
it's
But they're
their older
gonna
tool.
give yeah, it's their older tool. They have a new tool coming out with which is called Syson, which Ed mentioned earlier. But and they're gonna come back later this year to talk about that tool. But tomorrow, if you're available, please join us. Again, it's Wednesday, February 18th, from 6 to 8 p.m.
Let's all
Here.
call in and ask them about SysML v2. Yeah,
There you go. There
the
you
Capella
go.
guys are
So
good too.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Anyway, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.